and you're the person. Like, you're their person. Like, we brought them on the planet. We gave them life. And as much as they say, especially in the teenage years, that they don't like us, they want nothing to do with us, we don't understand them, you are still their person. In their brain, in the concept of their life, you are their parents. And if zombies started running around the world, they would turn to you. And it's important to remember that when they are acting the way that they will act, because they're trying to figure themselves out. But always remember that you are their person, as a responsibility and as a privilege.
Welcome to This Way Up. We are bringing you engaging, informative, and inspiring conversations surrounding all aspects of mental health from the perspective of us as parents and caregivers. I'm Andrea Nanigian.
And I'm Emmy Waters. When someone you care about is struggling with their mental health, this can be an incredibly stressful and challenging time. So we're here to provide valuable resources to support you as you navigate this journey.
Our guest today, Dr. Courtney Tracy, also known as the Truth Doctor, joins us in a very special episode where she speaks with a lot of vulnerability and truth. I mean, that's how she became the Truth Doctor, right? And on her story and how she has grown and has embraced some of her mental health challenges and is now sharing it with the world.
Courtney shares very honestly her experiences growing up with substance abuse, mental health challenges, and her diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. It's really interesting how she qualifies that diagnosis as an opportunity and a pathway for healing. And she's a mother of 2 young kids too. So she has a broad perspective of how we even parent our kids, how we receive their behavior in a positive way. And she gives us actionable steps to help our kids self-regulate. I think she's amazing. And again, Andrea, this is just one of those special people, angel-like qualities walking the earth with us. And I can't wait for everyone to meet her.
USC-trained psychotherapist Dr. Courtney Tracy, also known as the Truth Doctor, is recognized as one of today's most authentic, perspective-shifting voices on mental health and one of the first therapists to publicly disclose her own mental health disorders. As a multi-hyphenate healthcare entrepreneur and award-winning content creator, she has founded 5 mental health companies, and her work has garnered more than 100 million views. Good morning, Courtney. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited to dive deep into your story and who you are. I think where we should start, though, is kind of with this philosophy that you had, and what really attracted me to you in the first place was you said you have this human first philosophy. And I want to understand from your own words what that means.
Well, thank you. It's something that I take a lot of pride in. When I started creating my platforms, I realized that there was a statement that was needed for professionals of all kind, whether they were mental health professionals, medical professionals, or legal professionals, that emphasized that we all are going through the same experience. We're all going through the same conditions, and we all have the same emotions and potentially the same thoughts. They just sound and feel a little bit different. So human first, what that means to me is that regardless of any label that you may have, whether that's a professional label or a familial label, like parent, mother, father, child, we're all humans first. What does it mean to be a human? It means that we have feelings we don't necessarily always want to feel. We want to know everything, even though we don't, because that protects us and the people that we love. And we tend to sort of fall into those labels to protect ourselves. I'm the mom. I need you to listen. You're the child. I need you to wait. I'm the teacher. I'm the police officer. I'm XYZ. I need you to listen to me. And fundamentally, I think we would all listen to each other far more if we came to one another as humans to say, I have feelings, you have feelings, let's talk about them. I have this thought, you have that thought, let's talk about those thoughts. So it's a phrase to flatten the hierarchy, normalize what everyone experiences, and have everyone realize that they're more the same than they are different.
Mm-hmm. Puts us all on equal footing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you can think of it from two different ways. I think of it from when we were parents and we were so terrified and we didn't want to talk to anybody because we thought we were the only one going through it. And just to know that other people, everybody does have these feelings. Everybody has something that they're going through. And if you normalize it, then maybe more people would be more comfortable talking about our fragility, really.
Yeah, that really is what it is. I mean, this phrase started human first, as in like before my therapist role. But fundamentally, it comes down to the fact that, yeah, even if you put human before the mom role, then it gives you more of an opportunity to be like, well, there are other humans that have human children. I wonder if they feel the same. But we place this idea of a mom in our own heads and think we must be stable, we must have it all together, we must know exactly what we need to know to raise our children. And if we have a problem, we have to resolve it fully on our own, because if we don't, then we're weak or we're bad. And it's this conceptualization that we just seem to like absorb before we're parents. And then it just goes into hyperspeed when we are parents, because then we care so much more about how we're seen, how our kids are seen. And it's that overprotection of ourselves and our kids that makes us feel isolated when we don't need to be.
Thank you so much for clarifying. I really
Wow.
heard that differently
I
when
did
you
too.
said it in the mom version. It meant something completely different, because that is highly relatable. I will put my mom first persona ahead of my own feelings, needs, vulnerabilities, everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that hit loud and clear.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at today. I mean, you are an amazing asset, really, and have done so many already amazing things in such a short period of time. But I know that you have a lot of history behind you that has made you come to realizing that you can help.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California to a mother on welfare and food stamps. My parents had me when they were 19 and 20, never married. And my mom had a really difficult time raising me. I eventually had a half brother who's 3 years younger than me. That relationship didn't work out for her either. And so I was raised in a multi generational household. My grandma and grandpa, my uncle who has really severe autism, my mom, me, and my younger brother. It was a very chaotic household full of violence, substance use, emotional dysregulation, enmeshment, codependency. And I found substances at a really young age. At 13, I lost my virginity at 13. And I was on a really intense downward spiral related to sex and substances. And I went to rehab for the first time when I was 15 in San Clemente for methamphetamine and psychedelics. And I have never touched methamphetamine since that day. And there have been other substances that I've experienced because I was 15 when I first went to treatment. But I say that because it's really important that that experience that I had as a teenager, going through what I was going through, feeling like I had no parents above me to guide me or direct me, the environment that I found in that treatment center, although I find out later on it was an adult treatment center, unlicensed, that I wasn't even supposed to be in, is a little alarming. But it was the structure and the exposure to the psychology field that made me feel like there were answers to all the questions that I had when I was a kid growing up with all of these struggles. After I got out of that rehab, I knew a little more about what substances could do to me as a child, but I didn't quite know how to handle my emotions. So from 17 onward, actually 17 to 22, I experienced really intense symptoms of borderline personality disorder, which is an emotional dysregulation disorder that can lead to really intense violent episodes and suicidality. So it was a tough, tough upbringing. But I would say one of the lights that came out of my childhood was meeting my now husband. Next year, we'll be together for 20 years. We started dating at 15 years old. And
Oh
so
my
there's,
gosh, that's amazing.
thank you. There was a lot of obviously ups and downs with substance use and borderline and being young and not having the understanding of what a healthy relationship looked like, because I didn't have that in my household, was kind of wild to go through so much at such a young age. And my healing journey to get to where I was at today started at 22. So 22 and before was really most of the chaos.
When you were in the ages, you said 17 to 22, were you actively involved in therapies or other to where you had that diagnosis coming at you that you could work with?
No. So I was just active in my chaos and dysregulation from 15 to 22. At 22 is when I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder in an inpatient psychiatric detoxification ward in Santa Barbara, where I was going to college.
Wow. I'm just going to be honest. I have so many questions about the borderline personality disorder diagnosis, because from what I know, that would be really hard to receive for somebody who has borderline because of what I thought was inability to really maybe have that awareness, self-awareness, self-reflection, vulnerability. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because I'm actually asked that often. How do you respond to getting a diagnosis like that when there's so much stigma behind it and it's seemingly incurable? I mean, that's even what the clinical field used to say. So, I think because I found psychology as a field even at 15, because I was seeing a psychologist. I only went to that rehab for 3 weeks, probably because they're like, we need to get her out of here. She's not supposed to be in here at all. But I think it was that. So I started studying psychology in college at 17 years old. And so although I was still extremely chaotic, I had 5 years of a general understanding of the human condition and human behavior. But one thing that is important to know, which is part of what I share on my platform, is that just because you have this information doesn't mean that you're not going to be problematic, chaotic, and deregulated. So when I got the diagnosis at 22, it wasn't like a huge shock for me. One, I was pretty detached from society. I was busy being chaotic. So I didn't actually know that there was a lot of stigma attached to it. So I felt relief. I felt like, oh, there's a name for the combination of symptoms that I'm experiencing. And now I can go and seek treatment for it.
Sure. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Now, you were in the middle of college when this, or no, you just finished up with college?
I was in the middle of college. I had taken a 1.5 year break because my first boyfriend died, and then my second one died, and then my third one died in a 1.5 years, all from.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so that was really, really hard for me. Those were all relationships prior to the one that I had with my now husband at 15. So they were very young relationships, but it's quite shocking to have that happen over and over and over. So I left college, went back to college, didn't resolve any of that trauma. And that's ultimately what led to that diagnosis and that inpatient experience.
Can you elaborate on what the symptoms are? Explain for people who might not know what that entails.
Sure. So borderline personality disorder is an emotional dysregulation disorder. And there's 9 different criteria that you can have, and you have to have at least 5 of them to receive the diagnosis. Some of the criteria include fear of abandonment, and we can kind of go into how this developed based off of my childhood, because it's important to know. Side note, most people think that borderline is developed in people because they've been severely traumatized as a child, like outwardly on purpose from the parents, and that's actually not true. But so the first criteria is fear of abandonment. The second one is loss of sense of self, like you just don't quite know who you are, and inability to control your emotions as a result of that. Really intense, unstable interpersonal relationships. Because if you think about it, if you don't know who you are or how to handle your emotions, it's going to be very hard to have a stable relationship. There's also violence, physical outbursts, anger outbursts, and then it can lead So imagine someone having that, like that's their lifestyle, that's how they're coping with their existence. Then other criteria include suicidality and self harm, and then paranoid dissociation. So if someone's super angry and dissociated all the time and up and down, their brain's going to start to want to just shut off. Like, this is a lot of energy. This is really overwhelming. I don't have it in me to continue acting or feeling this way. So I'm going to completely shut down. So it's as though there's two ways that people best describe borderline. And one is it's as though our brain is a computer constantly on overdrive and everything is glitching, kind of like how our recording software today was kind of glitching. It's a little bit like that, but you have to keep going and you feel like you're in survival mode. So you're like trying to figure out life, but it's blacking out and you're confused and you feel like everyone is a threat. The second way that people describe it is more so that internal experience. And they say that it's as though it's like having third degree burns on your body that no one can see. And when you're outside in the world living your life, people are wondering why you're so reactive to something as basic and natural as the sun, but you feel like you're getting burned and everyone else thinks you're being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's got to be hard especially as a young person, because there's so much that young people are going through anyways, trying to understand their own emotions and be in this world. But then to have that on top, it's just got to be so difficult. Is there an age that borderline personality disorder comes about, or can it be diagnosed really at any age?
Well, we used to only diagnose older than 18 years old. And the reason for that is the developmental years. And now we're kind of at a place where if someone can be observed over a 12-month period where there isn't something that like could be causing the dysregulation, like hormone changes, puberty, going off to college, having a really intense high school breakup or something, is there a way to kind of gauge the behaviors for that long period of time? Typically, the symptoms do present in the teenage years, though, and they're called borderline traits. So it's usually 14, 15, 16. And that's because that's when the individual is starting to build their identity in society. And they're realizing that they don't quite have that sense of self. So they're not being stable in all of their relationships and all of their environments. They're molding to whatever they think they need to make those friends, to survive that environment or that situation. And that contributes to like the lack of understanding and then the more need to defend unconsciously against the world. So it starts usually around teenage years. And then it's the lack of being able to see that and go, I wonder what's underneath it. For parents or caregivers, most of the time it's, how do I just resolve it? Like, how do I just get the behavior to stop? Like, basically cut the weed versus figure out what's going on root wise. And there's a lot to say about that, right? Like, parents are busy, teenagers are difficult. And if there was more space in the world for both teenagers and parents to connect with one another, I think we could actually reduce a lot of those borderline traits in adolescence, and it wouldn't lead to a full-blown personality disorder.
So are you saying then that the trajectory can be slowed down or even stopped if it's caught early?
100%. And the research is showing that more and more. The clinical field was very stigmatized and judgmental against this diagnosis, but it's also because there was a lack of research. Like, it really was thought that basically it was teenage girls develop borderline personality disorder and become borderline women because they were severely traumatized as a child. And that means that they need to figure out their trauma, get over it, and get better. When in reality, what the research has now showed us is that people don't even have to be severely traumatized to develop borderline personality disorder. What we now function through is called the biosocial theory. And it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's important to acknowledge. And it's just that everyone's born with a level of sensitivity and a level of impulsivity. And people that are more prone to developing this diagnosis are extremely sensitive and have a general higher impulse level than most people. Their brain just jumps to action sooner than others. And their brain just feels more of their sensations more than others. So there's nothing pathological in that. But if you are a child that is slightly impulsive or wildly sensitive, and you live in an invalidating environment, solely invalidating environment, then you are at risk of developing borderline personality disorder because your emotions, feelings, and actions aren't understood enough and are probably like kind of pushed away. Like, this is a lot. I really need you to calm down. I need you to not be so sensitive about this. I need you to be quiet, sit down, put that on, and just get over it, which makes so much sense for parents. Like, I'm a parent, I get it. I'm like, please just put on your pants so we can go to the store, like,
Yep.
please. And it's not all the parents' fault in any way. It's all of this that's going on and just the way that the child was born. And so there's more of an understanding, and therefore now there's more treatment and more prevention.
What is the treatment?
The main treatment is, well, there's no medication for borderline personality disorder, but there's medications that you can take to mitigate the symptoms. So people with borderline personality disorder can get really angry or really anxious. So you can take anxiolytics or anti-anxiety medication, or you can take a mood stabilizer. Sometimes that does help people, but there's no like FDA approved medication for these symptoms. Most importantly, it's finding an environment that's validating for at least a year. Dialectical behavior therapy is the number one most supported treatment for borderline, and it lasts about a year if you're in an actual DBT program. There's also other kinds of therapies like mentalization based therapy, which what that helps the person do is understand the mind of the other person to help them understand their own. And that's like the mirroring that we do when we're a child. When we smile, our mom smiles. When we're sad, our mom hugs us. And oftentimes people with borderline, they didn't have that for one reason or another growing up. And so that's like the key piece to help the borderline brain calm down. You are seen. We see your level of sensitivity and we respect it, and we'll help you feel more comfortable with giving yourself space between those impulses because we'll make sure you feel safe. So there's different types of therapies and different types of medications, but ultimately it comes down to the environment, whether it's the therapist, the treatment center, the parent, the partner. It's letting the brain calm through safety and connection.
Can you find those healing opportunities? You said the best chance for healing is if you are in a validating environment. Can let's just say a teenager realize that full comprehensive validation if it's only coming through the therapeutic opportunities? Meaning, do they need to leave their home if the home environment or their family environment isn't validating and supportive?
That's a good question. And I think, the thing that I would consider is the home willing to become validating, to learn about the environment. It's easy for people, parents included, to understand that when we say mental illness or mental disorders are caused by biology and the environment, we totally accept that as the cause, but it's hard for us to realize that that's also the solution.
Yeah.
And if we are in the environment, then we have to change too. It's the same thing that we didn't cause this problem, but it's our responsibility to fix it. It's the same thing that the borderline individual has to do. The environment has to do too. And that can be really hard. It's important to say that would be really hard because the symptoms of borderline can really hurt other people. And it can create this like environment where it's like, I don't want to change. I shouldn't have to. You hurt me. And that's totally valid too. And it's, are we in this together or are we not in this together? And it's ownership where ownership belongs, and whatever that level looks like on each side.
We've heard a few times that behavior is communication. And I think when you're a mom and you're pregnant, that should almost be something that is just hammered into your brain, was that if your child is doing something that seems irritating, seems out of proportion, they're trying to communicate something. And the first time I heard that, it was so eye-opening for me. I was like, well, of course that's what it is. That's of course what it is. And, the things that you were going through as a young teenager with substance abuse and such, you were trying to communicate something.
Right.
Do you think kids that get into substance abuse, do you think they're trying to connect?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. And I think it's important for any question that's asked about any human behavior to know that there isn't one answer.
Sure.
There really isn't. I mean, there's different reasons for kids to use substances. Sometimes kids, let's say they're super sensitive. They feel everything from the tag on the back of their pants to how tight their socks are to the sound down the street. And it's so overwhelming for them. Maybe they have undiagnosed ADHD or they're just generally really sensitive. Maybe they're using substances to numb their sensory experience. Other times they could have really poor social skills and they're using substances to bond with their peers. Maybe they really hate their home life and they are numbing to pretend that they're in a different world or to disappear as much as they can without being totally gone. So it's really important to not say, oh, well, kids do this for this reason. I wonder why my child, knowing what I know my child has been through and the environment that I'm raising my child in, I wonder why they are using substances. And of course, as a therapist, I can be like, oh, the best thing to do is to go up and ask them. But also as a therapist, I'm like, they might tell
They
you
might
to
not know.
get away from them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it also takes a lot of self-reflection on the parent too. You have to be in a place that's going to accept that there are things that you may be doing unintentionally, probably, right, that are causing some distress to your child.
That's so important because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good at all to be like, wow, I definitely, like, they have every right to be mad at me. And I wish I was better in this way. And God, I wish I learned how to maintain this emotion when I was younger because now this is just so difficult. And then if you say, even as a parent, you're like, I'm sorry, I should have done that better. And the kid's like, yeah, you should have. And you're like, I know. But can you give me some grace here? Like, what's going on?
You have spoken so frequently about receiving a diagnosis and sharing that, but I can only imagine is an incredibly difficult moment to receive the diagnosis. How can you speak to people listening to this conversation about how to receive that, or even for their children who receive a diagnosis? How can we most completely be in that space to promote our healing or our loved ones' healing?
Yeah. A diagnosis is just a label for what you're already experiencing.
I love that.
And when you get the diagnosis, you get the pathway to healing. That is really all a diagnosis is, unless, of course, you're getting a terminal diagnosis. Then it's still good to know that information, but it gives you a pathway to healing. And hopefully, it will help people understand because it gives them a place to look, to learn, to understand, and for more information. People will use that label to judge you, to discriminate against you, to stigmatize against you. And it's important to realize that that's just coming from a place of fear. All that's really saying is, I really care about myself and I want to be okay. Even if it's in the most volatile, disrespectful way, that's really all the person is saying. I care about myself and I want to be okay. And what does that look like? It looks like, you're scary, I hate you, you shouldn't have kids, whatever it is. But that's important to realize. It's their fear being pushed onto you. You can accept it or not accept it.
That was a perfect answer, Andrea. I mean, that was...
I know. We were actually
eloquent.
just talking about this earlier, about the diagnosis. And
the diagnosis is the pathway to healing, the pathway to living.
Yeah.
I like how she said that the diagnosis is something that you already are experiencing.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah. It's just being able to call it something so that you can better understand it.
Yeah. And you have a roadmap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of how to proceed.
And I think on that note, there's a lot of talk. I'm obviously in the social media space and the diagnosis space. And so there's a lot of talk about self-diagnosis, kids and teens on the internet. And I get asked by doctors all the time too, like, do you think you're contributing to this? Like, I have kids and teens that just show up in my office and they say, I think I have this, I think I have that. And my response is, but aren't you happy that they're now in your office asking you for clarity? Instead of sitting at home going, what the heck is wrong with me? They found a label that they thought worked and they were willing to go and talk to you about it. They didn't just sort of absorb that label and run with it. That's the first thing that's important. Second thing is if you're a parent and you have a kid that's doing that, realize that just like we said earlier, behavior is communication and they're confused.
Right.
They want to know what's going on. They don't feel good. They feel like there's something in them that is bad, that is wrong. And that's why they're literally looking for a potentially pathological diagnosis to explain their behavior. They think something is wrong with them. And so before we go to, oh my God, get off TikTok. Why are you looking at those things? There is nothing wrong with you. They feel like there is. And you should touch that feeling. You should be in that feeling with them. That's the only way you're going to get them to not diagnose themselves with something that they don't have. Or that's how you're going to get to be their team member when they want to go talk to a doctor or a therapist about what might be going on.
What a great point.
Well, and even if what they're feeling isn't a diagnosis at all, there's discomfort there, and there is a need to be able to understand how to manage that discomfort.
And you're the person.
Yeah.
Like, you're their person. Like, we brought them on the planet. We gave them life. And as much as they say, especially in the teenage years, that they don't like us, they want nothing to do with us, we don't understand them, you are still their person. In their brain, in the concept of their life, you are their parents. And if zombies started running around the world, they would turn to you. And it's important to remember that when they are acting the way that they will act, because they're trying to figure themselves out. But always remember that you are their person.
Yeah, that's right.
As a responsibility and as a privilege.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have to have all the answers, and we don't have to be the fixers, but just being that steady presence of, I see you. Maybe I don't know the right move, but I'm not leaving. I'm with you.
Yeah. I don't know is totally fine to say. And if we don't say that as parents, then the kids are going to think they can't say that either. And they're going to compensate left and right.
Curating these valuable conversations is really about our shared passion for promoting mental wellness. Behind the scenes, however, there are some platforms and systems we utilize that cost money that help bring these episodes to you.
If you found value in our conversations and feel inspired to support, consider making a donation. Whether it's the price of your morning cup of coffee or more, your contribution directly supports our ability to keep connecting, sharing, and growing. Please visit our website at thiswayuppodcast.com to support this community. We thank you and we appreciate you. Curious about your relationship with your mom now. You said it was very chaotic, but I think I saw someplace that you guys are still bonded and such. What was that relationship like as you were discovering who you were and why you were acting like you were acting?
I love this question now. I had a hard time with it when I first started doing podcasts about 4 years ago, because I've learned a lot, continue to learn a lot about myself, my diagnosis, and the root of all of my problems. I used to blame everything on my mother. I mean, the way that I described myself earlier was like I grew up in, the way that I described myself earlier is not the way I used to describe myself. I used to describe it as I grew up in a household with a mom who was very abusive and very neglectful, and all the blame was on her. And over the last 4 years, including reading the research about borderline personality disorder, I've realized that that's just not the case. And the way that I describe it now is accidental abuse and unintentional neglect. And those two things are very important. I mean, I'm 33 years old, and 20 years ago, I thought one day I'd be writing the book that Jeanette McCurdy wrote, I Am Glad My Mom Died. I thought that was me. I thought I was going to be the one writing that book. And for a while I said to my husband, my life will be easier when she's gone. And it's hard for me to say that, probably because she's downstairs with my daughter right now. I don't want her to hear me. But she listens to all of this. So that's what I used to think. And that's what I used to say. And that's how I used to treat her.
What made you change that narrative?
What made me change that narrative was, one, becoming a parent of two, and realizing that was just 5 months ago, and realizing how difficult that is, and realizing she did that at 23, a decade younger than I am, with far less resources and no partner. And so I came to realize just how much effort, energy, and love did go into the fact that I'm still alive here today, and obviously was given enough resilience and space to be myself that I could become this person that I am today.
Oh, I've got goosebumps, just so you know.
I tell her now that I'm sorry. And I tell her that I remember all those times when she would say, one day you'll know. But until then, I will let you think. It makes me emotional too. I will let you think whatever you want about me. You can hate me. You can think I did all the worst things for you. And I'm still going to love you. And I hope one day you will realize the truth of what I've done. Now, there is factually abuse and neglect, and she admits that as well. And she was young and 19, and it was hard, and I get it, and it's not excusable, but it makes sense. But the majority of it, including some of the very solidified stories I told myself about my childhood, I now know are not the way that I told them to myself. And I've asked her, like, I thought she stuck me into this other school because she was obsessed with her sister and wanted to be her sister and wanted me to be like her sister's kids. When that actually wasn't the case, she realized that I was brilliant and gifted and stuck me in another school to get tested early with intelligence testing. And I hated it so much that I was like, I'm not going to this school. And she sent me back to the other school. But for 15 years, I thought she just tossed me around left and right. And that wasn't true at all. And I think it's very important to share that on this podcast, because I am one of those daughters that really thought she would hate her mom forever. And now I rely on her for everything. I want her to care for my kids. I trust her more than a nanny, more than a babysitter. And it's beautiful to see her care for my daughter, who's 5 months now, in the way that I know that she did the best she could and could have if she was in the position I'm in now.
Yeah.
So much grace. I love the forgiveness all the way around there. And I love hearing how your mother stood grounded, knowing that you would have these doubts or blame, and said, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful story.
Thanks.
It really is.
How has all of this insight and growth and healing and perspective influenced how you are parenting your kids?
Good question.
When I shared on my online platforms that I had borderline personality disorder, I expected so much pushback and judgment. And I actually didn't receive much of it. But the statements that I did receive over and over again were, sure, you have borderline. You're not a monster unless you have children.
Wow.
If you have children, you will become a monster. You will hurt them, and they will hate you as a parent. Now, there are a lot of stories online about people with borderline personality disorder hurting their kids. And I get it. And there are a lot of people that abuse their children that don't have that diagnosis at all. I mean, it happens.
Right.
The one thing that really gets me is children being hurt. Like I can't, it's the thing for me. So hearing those statements was really, really hard. And the more I looked into it, I realized that really is a huge misconception that people have when it comes to borderlines having children. If they're completely unaware of their diagnosis, if they have zero insight, then that could be cause for concern. But let me explain what I do now that I know that I have borderline. I know why. I know what it looks like in my brain, in my body, in my mind. And I see my children. Often they say people with borderline act like toddlers with tantrums. And that's true, because our brain froze in development as a child, and we learned to just survive. So it could go really one of two ways. Someone that has borderline that's a parent could see a tantrum or chaos or just like overwhelmed because they're super sensitive. It's like, now I have two kids. There's always sound. They're always touching me. And my brain is just going off thinking everything is wrong and a disaster. So it can either go where it becomes a huge issue and the person is just so dysregulated, they really should not have kids in their environment. Or it can go the other way where it's like, when I see my son having a tantrum, I don't even see him as my son Bodhi in the cute outfit that he's wearing and the cool haircut. When I look at him, I see his brain and the parts of his brain that are being activated. I look at his body and I see if he's tense or if he's loose. And I realize that although I'm conceptually looking at my son, that I want to act this way or act that way or get out the door or whatever it is, I'm not really dealing with that concept. I'm dealing with my son's amygdala in his brain that is activated right now and needs help calming down. And I know that because every day of my life, I have to take this little thing in my head right here and quiet it down, because at times it can be stronger than my consciousness. And I have to be aware of that in order to be a good mom. And so I've been able to teach my son how to emotionally regulate because I know how to emotionally regulate. And I say it in that way because every parent can and should do that. And just because someone has borderline personality disorder doesn't mean they're incapable of it. It does mean it may be far harder, but someone who has borderline and is working on it could have more of an ability to co-regulate their children than a regular parent with no diagnosis and no insight.
That's interesting. That makes sense.
And that's a great point.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking this whole time while you were talking, first of all, about how smart you are. I mean, I listened to you and you really are very, very intelligent.
Thank you.
But I think your curiosity about how you react and where you came from and what you were going through has led to your own growth. And I think that education piece of it is so important. And then to hear you talk about it from a parent standpoint, I know Emmy and I have talked about, that we should have this instruction manual at the very beginning of kids. But at least we should have some sort of class or something that talks about brain development.
Mm-hmm.
I know it changes all the time, but gosh, just to understand it would allow parents to have more empathy and to manage things less personally, I think, than kind of the current state of where we are being so reactive because our child is being reactive.
We're reacting to the behavior and not paying attention to the root issues or root causes.
Because you don't understand it, right? You don't. A new parent, unless you have some training in psychology, you don't really know it. You're really stuck at understanding it just based on how you were raised.
Exactly.
And most of us weren't raised ideally, and not because of intention, but because of lack of education, right?
Mm-hmm. Courtney, how do you teach somebody, or two parts, how do you, or how could I learn how to self-regulate? Or also, how would you teach or coach your child to regulate their emotions in a heightened state?
Our nervous system only has so many states. We have the excited state, which could look like excitement or anxiety or heightened. We have the depressant state, which could look like sulking on our couch, or it could look like feeling very relaxed. And there are only so many parts of our body and brain that cause us to be in those states. So the first thing that I've done with my son, and the first thing that I've done with myself, is teach him and me how to acknowledge those body parts, to really pay attention to how short my breaths are, how long my breaths are, how deep or how shallow, how my heart is beating, how fast or how slow, and also how fast my thought turns into action. Those three things: my breathing, my heart rate, and how fast my thoughts turn into action. My son understands memories as literal pictures in his brain. So like he'll go around like click, click,
blinking.
which is great. I'll ask him how he's feeling and he'll immediately go like this and take a moment to think about it. And he'll sit down and he'll close his eyes for like 20 seconds to figure out what it is he really wants to say in response. If we learned those three things when we were children, and if we learned those three things to teach our children when we first became parents, we would feel so much more in control of our own bodies. And I think a lot of people miss this very simple explanation of what a feeling is. And a feeling is the state of your body, the thoughts in your head, and that's it. But often people stay with the thoughts in their head. I'm feeling upset because they did this and I wanted them to do this, but they didn't do this. And now this is going to happen. And it's, you're missing 50% of the equation. And we don't really allow ourselves to fall into that body state. And that's kind of why you probably have noticed Western medicine, Western psychology over the last 5 to 10 years has been going far more towards the body-mind connection. It's been in the Eastern world forever, and now we're starting to integrate it clinically here. And the reason for that is people that have borderline, for example, 1 out of 10 of us will take our lives. The relapse rate for substance use is 60 to 80% after someone successfully completes treatment. And what is the reason for this? It's because we are missing 50% of the fundamental aspect of what it means to be a human on the planet. And so we don't only need to regulate our emotions by learning what to say or how to interact with people. We have to learn what our emotions even feel like.
Good point.
And really sit with what those are. We can't learn to regulate something that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm. And we're going so fast that it's hard to take those pauses.
That's what's not fair to parents.
Oh,
It's not.
Yeah. But even having a parent be that for a child, to point out the opportunity to stop and be in that moment and make those observations is huge. I would love to have, actually, you know what? We had, Andrea and I spoke to a woman a few weeks back, and they were doing this in the context of baseball. Do you remember, Andrea? Just having a partner to help you call out these moments and coach each other through these really small moments and opportunities to regulate.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that that's where these conversations keep coming back to. Pausing, taking a breath, being aware.
Yeah.
Consciously choosing.
And it's important to do those things when you don't need to do them. I think a lot of people don't realize that. They're like, okay, I'm going to have this skill or this intervention, and as soon as my child's upset, I'm going to implement the skill. When's the last time you were able to learn something in a moment of chaos?
Yeah, good point.
So we want to start practicing and teaching our kids these skills when we don't think that they need them, so that they're skilled enough in their brain unconsciously when they do need them. And another thing on teaching our kids these skills is to do so in a way where it doesn't feel like we're trying to prevent them from doing something wrong. And so one example is like when you're trying to teach a child to understand focusing on their breath. Some kids are like chaotic in their head and they're like, I cannot sit still. Like, I don't want to sit here and do this. Is you can take a balloon, for example, and put a string on it and just say, now I want you to blow up the balloon slowly. Then I want you to blow up the balloon fast. And then you can just have them ask, like, which one of those felt easier for you? Which one of those took more of your energy? And you're starting to teach them what it means to breathe slow and breathe fast in moments where it's fun and they're seeing a colorful balloon go up and down versus like, hey, you got really angry. I need you to sit there and like watch me breathe and breathe like me,
right.
Because they don't quite get that conceptually or the importance of it. And so teach them the skills when you don't think that they need it and outside of crisis moments, and teach them the skills in a way where it makes them feel like they're just learning something fun versus being punished and needing to learn a skill to prevent a consequence.
Yeah.
Okay, Emmy, do you want to have another baby so you can try this all over again?
I'll try that on my grandbaby someday.
I just listened to the all of these parents talking about ways to help their kids, and I'm thinking, gosh, that's just so brilliant. I mean, we had brilliance in our day too. But you learn so much more as things go on. And I love the conversations that people are having around emotions and mental health early on and allowing themselves to be vulnerable like you.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to thank you for being so vulnerable with everything. You must know how many people you're helping and not even really knowing how many people you're helping. I am sure.
I hope it's helpful.
Oh, I think it is. I think it is. That gets me to, how did you start? You were going to school, you knew that you were interested in psychology, and now you've kind of built this diverse empire around mental health resources. You come at it from so many different facets. I would love to know how you started in that.
Thanks. So after my diagnosis at 22, my husband said, "You really need to get yourself together because it's been 7 years already and I'm not willing to do more unless you're okay." So I said, okay, finished getting my bachelor's degree, went right into my master's degree, went right into my doctorate degree. I got diagnosed at 22 and I went to go finish my doctorate at 29. The year that I was supposed to finish my doctorate and become independently licensed with my master's in the state of California, my husband was publicly arrested in front of the city of Santa Barbara with his mugshot spread all over the city. And it was a really chaotic night. The first 6 years of my borderline caused him to experience PTSD, a lot of trauma. I was the poster child for borderline personality disorder. If you ever meet someone that knew me back then, the stories they tell you are probably true. And so we had a really difficult night 3 months into our son being born. We went out for the first time as new parents. We had one too many drinks. The first 6 years of our relationship resurfaced. I went to a friend's house. He went home and started experiencing a flashback where he called 911, hung up right away. There was no reason for him to call. They came to the house, wanted to do a wellness check. He has trauma with the police because of the things that I put him through. He refused to answer the door. They could hear our baby crying. Nothing was wrong, but that's a reason to stay and to make sure everything's okay. And he wouldn't let them in. So it was a standoff for about 5 hours in the middle of the night. And the next morning, his mugshot was plastered everywhere. And we were 3 years into owning a substance use mental health treatment center. So I was getting my doctorate, getting my license, and was the founder and owner of a mental health treatment center when this happened. I plummeted. 7 years into continued recovery from borderline, I regressed significantly for about 6 months. I was over drinking. I wasn't coming home. I was escaping to Vegas. It was my worst nightmare because my dream was to create a family and provide my child with something that I never had. And when that happened, I thought it was over. So I started acting like it. And after about 6 months, I realized that I was drowning in the stigma that I just went to school for 12 years to reduce, and I needed to do something about it. So the only truth that I knew at that time was that I was a therapist with mental health issues. And I needed to share that with people in order to find connection and to find healing and proof that it was okay that I am the way that I am, and that it's also okay that I want to get better and that I can continue to. So I made an Instagram account at the end of that year, 6 days after I got my doctorate and my license, and on my son's first birthday. I made my first post as the Truth Doctor. And I said, there's one thing that gets me through my life. Follow me to figure out what that is. And that one thing was telling the truth. And so it's been 4 years now. And I have shared about my childhood, my substance use, my diagnosis, my continued issues, and my heart, and what I really hope for people. And that there's two sides to every coin. And I've really just tried to teach people that underneath all of the stuff that we want to hide, there's goodness and there's potential and there's forgiveness and there's grace. And So far, so good.
You are so brave.
I just want to hug you. I know.
Gosh, dang, it's so fucking brave. That is one of the most amazing things ever.
Thank you.
You just immediately turn to your truth and sharing, and then clearly healing a multitude of people.
Wow.
Remarkable.
The gift that you gave to so many others, really, because you sharing your truth, I am sure has opened the door for others to share theirs.
That's my number one goal.
Wow. I don't even know how to move past this one because it was so good.
I love this conversation so
Courtney,
much.
I do too. I'm so thankful that you said yes, because I think that so many parents are going to listen to this and just understand and almost give them, I think they're going to give themselves grace, really, that it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's okay.
Because it is okay.
It is okay.
It is okay. We are all in it.
Now, thank you for simplifying what Andrew and I often just swirl around talking about in so many things we've discussed. I just feel like you so eloquently simplified and made things easily actionable.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to today's conversation. To join our community and access more valuable resources, please visit our website at thiswayuppodcast.com.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this with a friend. And to stay connected, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Listen to This Way Up.